thank you for joining us today for the community talk. For this month, for the month of April, we have Dr. Shiva Prakash joining us. Dr. Shiva is a psychiatrist and researcher by profession. He's currently working as a consultant psychiatrist at a number of hospitals and residential facilities, educational institutions. He completed his MBBS in 2004 and went on to do his MD in psychiatry from AIMS, New Delhi. After which he moved to the United States he joined School of Medicine, Buffalo, for about 3 years, and then went on to join John Hopkins Hospital, where he worked in the division of child and adolescent psychiatry for another 2 years. Coming back to India, Dr. Shiva has been associated with the hospitals like the Kanchi Kamakoti Child's Trust Hospital, Chennai, and numerous other hospitals. He is also a consultant psychiatrist for IIT Madras, among other places. He is also working with SCARF Chennai. SCARF is a schizophrenia research foundation based out of Chennai, India, where he is working not only as a psychiatrist for inpatients and outpatients at the facility, but he's also involved in teaching and supervising students of psychiatry, developing modules. He is also working on a youth mental health program called SCARF YMH. Along with that, he is involved in multiple research projects. He is also a member of prestigious medical societies like the Indian Psychiatric Society. And we are so delighted to have you here with us today, Dr. Shiva. There is just so much that you've been involved with and working in. And I feel like there's just so much to talk about here today. So thank you so much for joining us. Welcome.
My pleasure. Thank you for having me here. Quite a few fingers and quite a few pies. But hopefully I'll be able to do justice to all of them. So thank you for introducing me and having me here.
All right, so let's dive right in. Dr. Shiva, you did pursue your career in medical sciences and went on to do psychiatry. So let's start at the very beginning. What made you choose medicine?
Unlike most superhero or supervillain backstories, I don't have a major backstory. I'm kind of old, and at the time that I was growing up, I'm not that old, but I'm kind of old. So we had very few professions that we could choose from. Enter school, you come out either a doctor, engineer, or CA, right? Everything else was secondary. I did not have any particular interest in medicine one way or the other. I just knew I couldn't do arts because I was pretty horrible at it. I was horrible at history. I was horrible at economics. I couldn't count money. I still don't know how to count money. So commerce was out, so I was stuck with science. And in science, one of the best things that I loved was the scope of what all you could learn. So 11th and 12th, I really enjoyed learning science. I did pretty reasonably well in physics and chemistry. Biology was there. But all in all, I had lots of fun just studying. And it's just per chance that I cleared the entrance exam to get into medicine. My backup plan was originally to do mathematics. So standard thing, I come from a middle class family. So my parents taught me they couldn't afford to send me to any paid seat. So it was either get into a government college, which is I did get into, or you could do some basic bachelor's course. So my interest was mathematics, and that was my backup plan. So medicine was, I would like to say, a chance occurrence of having enjoyed science and being relatively okay at answering MCQs. So theory was horrible. MCQs I was pretty okay, so I got that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So it was a chance occurrence, you're saying. It wasn't so much of an intentional decision or something that you. So how was the experience of the medical school? Not because you were going with an open mind, so to say.
Exactly. So I I'd like to say, like I said, learning was fun for me in 11th and 12th. Uh, the first year of medical school is basically all theory. So you don't actually get to be in a hospital. You don't get to see real people. But you do see real people amongst your colleagues, your teachers and stuff, but you don't get to see patients. So uh, first year was a drag. It was horrible in the sense that you have to learn basic sciences, anatomy, physiology, biochemistry. And I was in half a mind to just give it all up. But then second year came along and we had theory classes, yes. But then we also started getting exposure to the clinic. And I can tell you that being in a hospital like the MMC GH, it used to be the government hospital, just the plain GH at that point of time. Uh, it's there's no fulfilling. I mean, there's no experience which I would say which is more fulfilling in the sense that every single day you walk into the ward, you learn something, right? It's and you can choose any ward. You can just walk into any of the wards. I mean, I wouldn't recommend that, but second year of medical school, we had clinical postings, but I used to go back in the evenings, right? So I used to love admission days for any of them. Just go sit, see somebody who's come in new. Uh, it feels now in retrospect, I might think that, okay, maybe I was using learning as a, when patients came in, when people came in, I was more intent on gathering history and doing clinical examinations. But now, when I think back, maybe I should have been a little bit more empathic and caring about their scenario rather than just me wanting to learn. But once second year came, I knew for a fact that this is something that I want to do for the rest of my life. And again, it didn't matter what I did, right? Uh, you take medicine, you've got loads of things. You take surgery, you've got loads of things. I mean, even dermatology, like you think skin में चार बीमारियां हो सकती है, आंख इतना छोटा सा है, what do you expect? But there is so much to know, so much to learn. It was like Christmas for me every single day. Like there's something new every day. So I got the hang of medicine and I loved doing medicine.
So while you were at the hospital, because you were also studying simultaneously and you have multiple subjects. So, what were some of the subjects or fields that you were interested in at the time or that excited you?
Like I said, I loved everything. When we had a month of ophthalmology, I would come out thinking, okay, this is it for me. And then next month I'd go into ENT, and then I would think, this is it for me. In the background, it was, I mean, surgery and medicine, like general medicine and general surgery, was something that we were constantly exposed to. And I knew for a fact maybe I wouldn't be an orthopedician. I wasn't built like it. Pretty skinny guy that I am. So, but everything else, it was free play for me in the sense I could have chosen any one of them, started spending more time over there. But then from there, I went into neurology. Oops. And that's where, so neurology and neurological sciences was where I kind of ended. So even, I mean, by the third year and fourth year of college, my friends would come to me and they would talk with me about every single neurological case that they did, because I mean they saw in the clinic or wherever, and then we'd have a chance to discuss. So I became the kind of go-to person to just sit and chat about neurology. Problem is, they didn't talk to me about anything else, so I felt pretty left out. But uh, but now I knew exactly what it meant to be a patient, because in a way, in a government hospital, you do end up kind of getting used to teach, like every patient has to teach you, sort of thing. So medicine neurology was where I kind of landed in the end. uh,
Yeah.
Psychiatry was just an offshoot of that.
So it sounds like even at the time, or maybe now, with in hindsight, you're able to also look at empathy and coming from that perspective as well towards the patients.
Right. And that's why uh, whenever I do talk to my current, well, they are all postgraduates, people who come after finishing their MBBS, or even if I go and talk to uh, MBBS students, wherever I do get a chance to talk, I do insist on having fun while learning, but making sure that you don't end up acting like an ass, to say the least.
Yeah.
But that's something that I would keep insisting. Like, make sure to understand the person as a person before you identify their problems as a problem. And that's something that is seriously lacking at this point of time. We tend to objectify people. Okay, uh, did you see that cardiac case? Did you see that neurological case? Did you see that gastrointestinal case? Right? But we forget to say that this is a 35-year-old male, married, coming from this place, having two kids, working as this, who has this problem, right? So, I mean, unfortunately, it's not something that we are taught actively. But I'm glad that over a period of time, I've realized that I can correct my mistakes and hopefully help other people not make the mistakes that I did.
So this just makes me wonder about what role does a person's context, their life and the context that they are operating in. What role does that play in illnesses? And as a doctor, how important is that to gauge that for you?
Uh, I mean, it's really, really important. We know that we are not treating a heart, which is, or a lungs. We are not treating the heart or lungs in and of itself. We are treating the heart and lungs, which belongs to an individual living in a community. So if I were doing basic sciences, I would just take a cell, put it in a petri dish, and I could do whatever I wanted with it, right? But unless, if I actually want to see people get better, if I actually care for people, I would need to make sure that their social situation or whatever treatment that I recommend is viable in their social situation. A common example would be, we can approach this a couple of ways. So think about miners, right? For a long time, we didn't know that mining, zinc and asbestos mining, right? So we know that people who used to do that tended to have developed sorts of lung problems which were very unique to them, silicosis, asbestosis, and things like that. So one thing that we would recommend is, like, get out of the place with the job. But what sense does it make to tell a person who has two kids, a wife whom he has to feed, and is 40 years old, to say with the only job that you know, right? So, I mean, this is something that I learned as time went, that doing medicine is not just about prescribing medicine, but it's about understanding the social context so that we are able to do some sort of a social work. Start thinking about, okay, this is not the greatest until we find a different environment, a different workplace. What can we do? Because it might take some time before you're able to get out, right? So we might think of double masking. I mean, this is the most basic intervention, right? So you wear proper mask, you use adequate protection, you go in. Meanwhile, you have something running in the background looking for alternates, right? Uh, I remember that one time one of my teachers, right, he insisted that the wife who was already, she had studied up till I think bachelor's or something, but the husband, I mean, it was the standard Indian story like ladka mil gaya shadi kar diya types, right? And so she was stuck at home taking care of kids. So my prof actually sat down the wife and the husband together and told, like, if you continue working in this asbestos factory, you're probably going to die soon. So until you are able to find a job, you'll start getting your wife to start working while you learn how to cook. I understand that we live in a patriarchal society for all this time, but when you have resources and when you don't use them, it's wrong. It's just plain outright. And the man and woman eventually started working. Both of them started working outside, and he came back and he said, like, he was so happy that he was able to spend some time with the kids. They grew up, and now they are off at school and they were taken care of, right? Schools and essentially babysitting place for them. So they went off. He would work, she would work, and both of them were able to manage pretty well. So, I mean, that's just not just the reason why certain illnesses happen, but also that we have to think out of the box. We have to think on our feet. We have to kind of break certain pre-existing thought processes like शादी किया है घर पे रहोगे टाइप्स नहीं शादी किया है तो आप भी काम कर सकते हो. There's nothing that prevents anybody to be on an equal footing sort of thing. So that's something that I learned during that time, and I've tried to make sure that the treatment of the illness doesn't become more painful than the illness itself.
Oh, wonderful. Yeah, look, because there are, I mean, especially during the COVID time, I think all the flaws of the medical sector also kind of came out, how much, I guess, the disassociation from the patient and all of those things. And then also parallelly talking about empathy and to be able to take somebody's context while you are treating them. It just shows how important that is. So yeah, lovely. So so now you've completed your MBBS, and you have some sort of a interest developing towards neurology. And how did you? What made you think about going for MD right after that? How was that journey of getting into AIMS and choosing psychiatry and all of those things? How did that come about?
So again, I think I would say that I'm reasonably good at answering MCQs. So I knew that I may not have been satisfied with just an MBBS. At that time, we still had opportunities for MBBS physicians to start up their practice, set up shop, and do their work. Right? I really wanted to build up my skills, learn something more, and essentially be an adolescent for slightly longer, because you don't get paid that much. But I remember the first time I went to Delhi from Chennai, I still had to ask my dad for money, like paise de do, mere ko join karna hai. And it was okay, but so I knew that if I were to want to do neurology, I'd either have to do medicine or medicine. There's no other option. General medicine, which is. And at that point of time, I was keen on doing something wherein I could learn something and just start applying it. I went into psychiatry. So I had a few choices, but I chose psychiatry as a very conscious decision because it's the closest thing to neurology, in the sense that both of them at this point of time, we know that most mental illnesses are diseases of the brain occurring in the context of individuals in their societal and socioeconomic environment. So psychiatry really piqued my interest over there. So even though I had a few choices, I chose psychiatry because I could learn lots more. Again, there's so much to learn in psychiatry. AIMS was another high pressure sort of environment, in the sense that from the day that you join over there, right, you just start seeing people. I mean, there's no probationary period, essentially. There's no training period. Training happens on the job. So the very first day, you just start sitting with a senior in an outpatient department, start doing calls with a senior in the inpatient, you start going on rounds. I mean, you won't be assigned patients directly. Interaction is a learning experience. So we never had like a formal, let's sit down and this is what is psychiatry sort of class, right? It was like, you come here, learn on the job, figure it out sort of thing.
Wow.
So I'd like to say by the third week onwards, we started getting our own patients assigned. So it started off pretty early, in the sense that we just get patients assigned, and then we'd have to go and discuss this with a senior consultant, talk about what we think is going on, talk about what we can learn from them. And so it was never that in the first few days or the first almost a year or so, there was always an understanding that there would be supervision. There would be constant supervision, in the sense that we weren't allowed to make, for lack of a better word, we weren't allowed to screw up big time, right? We were allowed to make mistakes in speech, but not in action, right? And that first year was really, the learning curve was so steep that by the time we came into the second year, we were pretty much confident that, okay, now we know the basics. Here is what we are going to do. Here are the things that we absolutely will not do, because it's been drilled into our head. Bad idea, bad idea, bad idea. Got it. So not going to do those things at all. Psychiatry, again, the first year of psychiatry, the learning curve was steep, and then it kind of plateaus out, and then there'll be peaks every now and then, but you have mostly a plateau sort of thing in terms of learning.
So I'm just imagining that I assume that you've grown up in Chennai and Tamil Nadu, and then you're coming to Delhi for your MD, and to a place like AIMS that it's extremely reputable, but it is also a government setting where I'm sure that the cases are pretty severe and from all sorts of socioeconomic standards and from all parts of the country as well. Adjusting to a completely new environment in terms of culture, and then also, like you said with psychiatry, that from day one you are just put into that place of, okay, just taking patients, and not with a lot of theory happening on the side. You're taking. So I'm just imagining that it must have been quite an adjustment for you, and for anybody who's coming from such a different cultural setting as well.
So a little bit of background. My dad was a banker, so we used to move I've lived in a lot of places. I've lived in Nagpur, Pune, Goa, Secunderabad, Delhi. So I actually finished my schooling about 4 years in Delhi. So Delhi is like second. It's my home sort of thing. It was my home. I went to Delhi recently, and it's changed a lot. Hi, I'm really sorry.
No problem. You were saying that you recently visited Delhi.
Here, so it's changed a lot right now. But otherwise, Delhi is like home to me. I know places both in Old Delhi and New Delhi. Well, I used to live in Old Delhi, so Old Delhi is quite familiar to me. The culture shock wasn't there. It wasn't like I was seeing something totally new. I was fairly conversant in Hindi. I was more conversant in Hindi because, again, having a transferable job, one of the first things you learn is Hindi, other than English. That was perfectly fine. Actually, I had to learn Tamil with
I'm so sorry, Dr. Shiva, but the internet, I think, is a bit unstable. So I missed what you said towards the end.
Yeah. Is this any better? Yeah. This thing might probably be better. Sorry. So as I said, I had to learn Tamil once I came to Chennai.
Okay.
How to speak. So MBBS was not only a training in learning about medicine, but it was also a training in learning how to speak Tamil. I would like to say that I never had the deer in the headlights look when I sat in the OP in Delhi, either because of the culture or because I knew for a fact that I'm here to learn, right? So even when people would say brilliant things around me, right? It still was like, yeah, sure, you've got experience. I'm going to wait it out, right? So even today, it's like listening to music, right? Working with every single individual is like listening to music, because each time you hear somebody play or sing something, right, it still feels good. It still is amazing. It still is that you're learning something new. Like I can hear, I don't know, Arjit sing so many songs, right? But you might end up listening to the same song twice and you'd see, oh, he can sing this way also somewhere in between. I wasn't competing with anyone. It was easier for me to just sit, wait it out and learn, sort of thing. So thankfully, my life experiences prevented me from being a deer in the headlights, sort of thing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's lovely. So, talking about aims and again the steep learning curve that you talk about, I imagine that the first year must be really difficult for a lot of students, and also among medical colleges, the suicide rates are quite high. Plus, I remember reading this document which said that that in the medical profession in the medical professions, psychiatrists rank on as number two in terms of suicide. First being cardiovascular related doctors, and then second is psychiatry. So, what are your thoughts regarding that, and how is the atmosphere around psychiatry in medical college, especially during your specialization years?
I I'd like to say I had fun. Well, again, I think in psychiatry there was a lot of support, right? Like I said, we were allowed to say whatever, just not do something which would potentially hurt anyone. But I do realize that once you come into private practice, it's a whole another ballgame, right? There is a lot of loneliness amongst physicians, in the sense that people work atrocious hours. I mean, I've got colleagues who work till 1 a.m. in the morning. They'll be seeing outpatients till then. I mean, what we are never taught is that, I mean, of course, there's also the part wherein doctors may be both put on a pedestal as well as gotten down from the pedestal really quickly. So there's always that tension within you to make sure that you're not doing something wrong, right? And that is especially true in private practice. For people who work in learning educational institutions, there is a lot more balance. So within AIMS, I would like to say, at least in the psychiatry department or even amongst the other departments, there was reasonably good support for both the residents, the junior residents at our level or the faculty at their level. But I know for a fact that once you come out, you're pretty much on your own. And that's a scary thought. I mean, even our professional affiliations are like once in a year you go meet somebody in a conference, but for the last 2 years, even that hasn't happened, right? So I would say that yes. Actually, I think anesthesiologists top the list, and one of the reasons why anesthesiologists top the list is because they have access to potentially fatal things, right? Psychiatrists do come a close second. Psychiatrists are also supposed to have the highest rates of divorce, right? And so, yes, it is pretty bad, but I guess I've been sheltered a lot again all along the way. And maybe I built in something within myself to make sure that I had to take care of myself before anything else, right? That's something that we are not allowed to do essentially. I guess that's a model of health for the physician which needs to change. I would say I've been lucky all along. I've had great friends both in AIMS as well as abroad, and we still keep in touch, and we still see each other on Facebook and we realize that medicine or doing work is just one part of what we do. Each one of us has got so many other things which is happening, right? Which are happening. Yeah. So I've been lucky, I'd say.
Yeah, so when you say sheltered and when you say lucky, I think one of the things that might include that is what you mentioned about being connected to other psychiatric friends, psychiatrist friends. So can you talk a bit more about about that being sheltered or that space that you have created for yourself?
So I would like to say that I've got at least five people. Three of them are psychiatrists. Two of them, one is a pediatrician, one is a cardiologist, actually. So I'm really open to them. So there'll be days when I'm absolutely completely down, totally drained, and I still have their number, and they still know that if they can call me, I can call them. So it's a small group that we've set up for our, well, it's more a one-on-one. It's not even a group activity. So I just go through these five numbers on my phone book on any day that I'm feeling really, again, down, out, crappy, whatever you want to call it, right? And not just that, but these are also the people who are my first go-to people when I want to share something that's positive in my life, right? And they treat me the same way. So it's nice to have that sort of a connection where these people actually understand that, okay, here's a human being who's suffering, not a physician who's not doing his work, right? Because sometimes outside the medical community, number one, it's not acceptable to show it out, which is why most physician suicides or most physician problems never come to light, right? You hear stories of physicians dying of a heart attack in the middle of operations and in the middle of their outpatient clinic. People don't take care. It's not okay to speak. And that's a terrible situation that we are putting people that care for us in. So, well, these five people, they treat me the same way. So I've had opportunities where I've had to go to their houses when they were in a crisis. And there have been times where they've stayed up till like midnight just to sit and chat with me, like on really bad days. So I would like to say I'm really grateful for having friends like this, and not just grateful, but really lucky.
You just said that like talking is not okay or not talking is the norm. So how did that tend to become the norm among doctors?
Think about it. One of the things is, again, like I said, physicians are kept on a pedestal here. Doctor साहब आप तो भगवान हो. नहीं बेटा मैं इंसान हूँ, right? Nobody gets it कि भाई मैं भी इंसान हूँ. There is only so much that knowledge can get you, but then you keep getting fed this thing of आप भगवान हो, आप भगवान हो. How can भगवान fall sick, man? So it's people don't talk about it. It's almost like there is this thing about toxic masculinity, right? Boys don't cry. Similarly, physicians can't complain. Sorry, boss. Right? It's almost like something which the society also expects or has been expecting. It has been saying it. Not like you're not allowed to. Not that you're not allowed to complain, but आप तो भगवान हो. भगवान किसके पास जाके complain करेगा, right? So I mean, these subtexts are a bigger problem, right? The other thing is, as I said, there is a huge amount of loneliness in the sense that once you're out in private practice, it's more about survival rather than it is about actually connecting, learning, and things like that, right? So when it comes to survival, you think about the Maslow's pyramid. You make sure roti, kapda, or makan is set not only for yourself but your bache also, right? And sometimes, especially in crowded cities, where you have a number of physicians, so the physician to patient ratio is too much. You're always playing catch up rather than anything else. Of course, people also tend to find other ways of coping, which are not great, which is true for any occupation. Like we know that sometimes substance use is a problem. And these are things which we are never taught in medical school. We are taught medicine, but we are not taught, let's say, how do you take care of yourself so that you do a good job. We are not taught about taking time for yourself. We are not taught about the value of speaking, the value of having the appropriate societal connection. You have appropriate societal connections to get a better job, but you don't have the appropriate social connections to make a connection with somebody, let them speak, you speak, and whatever, right? That doesn't happen. Failing our physicians at multiple levels, I personally feel, in the sense that when we don't train them, when we don't tell them that, look, it's okay to take a break, it's okay to go on a vacation, and not every vacation has to be like a fancy location. It can even be a Saturday, Sunday, आप घर पे बैठे हो, चाय बना रहे हो, खुद चाय पी रहे हो, सो रहे हो, right? That is, sometimes people don't accept that, and that's a hard place to be, I would say. That's an extremely hard place to be. I'm not blaming the society. I'm just saying that I guess we haven't done a good job of training our physicians well and taking care of themselves.
So I think you mentioned a couple of things here. You have talked about the societal expectation of having to I mean, like that godlike stature that is given to the doctors. And you've also spoken about medical training and surviving as a private practitioner. So it feels like, there are a number of factors playing in here when it comes to taking care, and again, I think also mental health of our doctors and of our physicians. Thank you so much, Dr. Shiva, for that.
And this might be definitely my viewpoint on how I see it, but I guess it does have some. It has borne out during this pandemic also, right? I mean, if you remember the first round of the pandemic, we had so many deaths, and what we noticed was people who tended to die more were people who had multiple medical comorbidities. It's really unfortunate that I lost one of my batchmates. I mean, I started off saying that I'm kind of old, but I'm really not that old. I don't think somebody my age deserves to die. And I've heard the same story that almost every single batch has lost at least one person to COVID. Either here, this individual that died was in India. I know of somebody who died abroad, right? So, I mean, it does come back to bite us someday. And unless we think about it, we are probably not going to live it out. I mean, we are not going to be able to survive it. Again, this is my thought. Evidence might be against me, but I just think we need to start thinking about taking care of physician health.
Yeah, definitely. So I was also thinking about, like you said, that societal expectation of godlike stature and when things. So I also wonder what, like I know this in terms of gender, that a lot of times women are also, and especially mothers or women in powerful positions, are also often recycling the same patriarchy and letting that go on, for letting that move forward. So even in terms of, I guess, physicians, when you are approaching each other for when you are sick, when there are physical ailments or mental illnesses for that matter, how is that as an experience?
I'm not sure I understand the question.
So when you say, like patients will come to you and say that you are God, and that showing vulnerability maybe, is not accepted, or even getting sick is not accepted, or like you said, that a surgeon dying of a cardiac arrest during a surgery, that just sounds, I mean, I don't know. And with COVID as well, having so many comorbid conditions, there definitely seems to be a lot of uh, pressure or stressors that come with the profession. Mm-hmm. And I guess what I was asking is then reaching out for, I think, like one of the things that you do in your youth mental health program is also talking about prevention rather than prevention rather than aftercare, and all of those things are there, but the first part is prevention or taking help early interventions. So I guess that is the place that I'm coming from when I'm asking that, for you to seek help for yourself. And also when you're seeking help, the kind of response that uh, one may get while taking that help, and not just mentally, I don't mean that just in a mental context, but also in physical health situations where like hypertension and things like that.
There's another axiom that I'd like to share, which is that doctors make the worst patients. So I would like to say that from my own personal point of view. For example, I had certain physical difficulties and I was like, हाँ ठीक हो जाएगा, ठीक हो जाएगा. And I kind of, being a psychiatrist, I probably said to myself, it's all in your head rather than something. And I just kept pushing through, right? And this one was, I underestimated the risk for myself. Finally, it got out of control and I had to go see a physician and get a surgery and stuff like that. The first thing the physician said was, what were you doing all this time? The surgeon also basically said, okay, I get it, like you're busy and everything, but this is not something that you could have tolerated for this long. So thankfully, it was just a surgery. It was just something that got fixed. But I don't know if this answers your question entirely. I would like to say that physicians kind of get the perspective of somebody else who's been suffering. So if a physician were to go and ask for help, they would get the help, right? And nobody is going to judge them for anything like that, right? They're not going to be judged by the other person, the treating physician. The problem is getting up, leaving whatever you're doing to go and seek help. Those are the logistic issues which we need to start thinking about. I mean, you bring up this interesting point, and I think it comes back to my original thought about patients and society and everything, right? If we need to make a meaningful impact on a physician's life, it has to be on the terms of the person who's coming to seek help. So I can have a clinic at 6 o'clock in the morning because I get up at 6 o'clock in the morning. But I know for a fact no other physician is getting up at 6 o'clock in the morning or whatever, right? So what's the point of running a clinic at 6 o'clock? What's the point of running a clinic, say, at 6 o'clock in the evening when people are running their clinics? Right? We'd have to meet the patient, and in this case, the physician patient, where they are, rather than where we want them to be. I think for that aspect alone, telemedicine has been a boon, right? Telemedicine, teleconsultation, because we can have this conversation with me sitting in Chennai and you sitting wherever. Where are you?
Dehradun.
Dehradun. Awesome. Lucky you. Right? So we can have this conversation within the same time zone, thankfully. But we can have this conversation. It can be a meaningful thing. We can get appropriate help, or we can have a conversation. So teleconsultation is a great boon, and that would help us meet the physician patient where they are, rather than asking them to take out like an enormous amount of time to go from here to there, see the physician. I mean, resources are there everywhere. If we were to just say, okay, get this test done, send me the results, right? You get it done wherever and you send me the results, right? It's just so much easier. But until now, we didn't have access to this. We didn't think of this. So at a great cost of life and a lot of pain to people, the pandemic has actually taught us newer ways of doing stuff. I'm not being an ass, but I'm actually being grateful to the pandemic that I learned something new, that we can do something different. That's probably something that we need to start building in. And again, we can't change the society. I'm not here to change the society. No, I'm here to just say that if there is somebody who needs help, we have to figure out what's the best way of helping them, rather than saying, here are my terms, meet me in this box and we'll do this, right? And that's a short way of failure.
Absolutely, yeah. Thank you so much, Dr. Shiva. I think like two things that I kind of picked up in terms of how we can take care of our doctors is number one is just I think that dialogue of taking help and taking her help early. That seems to be one big issue that is there. And the second is then of logistics, of what you said, of okay, that in terms of receiving, I mean, like the person you're going to is there is still some sort of empathy and understanding the doctor's context, but the issue is in logistics of also taking that support. So yeah, thank you so much, Dr. Shiva. I just quickly want to because I feel like we are running out of time and there is so much that I wanted to talk about. So maybe like quickly, okay, let me ask one last question of the day, and then we can open it to our participants. I'm sure people have quite a few questions for you. Um, I guess my last question that I would like to end with is that you because I feel like we've talked about medical training and medical institutions and again taking care of doctors. What are your hopes from everything that is happening in the medical, especially with institutions and training in particular? What are your hopes for the new students of any kind of medical sciences, but particularly psychiatry? And what are some of the things that you would want institutions to be more mindful of or inculcate in their training?
Okay, this is a tough one. And I'm sure all the medical students will say, he's old, he's got experience, he'll say this obviously, right now I've got to learn this. But rather than thinking about, there's so much focus on gaining knowledge rather than understanding the individual. I think all medical students should go in with the humility to understand that people have different life experiences, and those different life experiences shape the way that they see the world. It's not just that, it's not a knee jerk, right? A knee jerk can be shaped by so many medical ailments, but the medical ailments are shaped by the society that we live in. So uh, unless you're treating one particular cell, right, in a petri dish, you better try to understand the context in which a person is coming from. Again, I know for a fact that most medical students will put to me and they'll say like, nahi, nahi, बूढ़ों को और कुछ सोचा नहीं types, right? But uh, but from our institutions, I think it would be really important for us to provide not just physicians, I mean nurses, I mean hospital administrators, I mean from the janitor to the top, right, of the hospital. And each one of them has proved their mettle during the pandemic, right? Each one has gone above and beyond what they signed on the paper for, right? But taking care of them is essential. So, and it doesn't mean just saying like, okay, our hospital staff gets free treatment, right? We don't want free treatment. We want that you think about, here are the stresses that people experience. How can we make our workplace environment safer? Because once you take care of the physician or the hospital staff, you're automatically taking care of the patient. We don't want impaired physician, impaired nurses, impaired janitorial staff to do incomplete work. So I think going forward, focusing on learning about taking care of yourself is probably more important, or helping staff learn to take care of themselves is probably more important than anything else. Again, that doesn't mean that you celebrate Doctor's Day, Nurses' Days, Janitor's Day. That's not it. This is an ongoing, everyday thing, right? This is like dal chawal. I can have biryani once a week or once a year. But dal chawal I need every single day, right? This has to be dal chawal for everyone, without which we might, it's not the greatest of situations.
So in terms of, I guess, in terms of actionable tools, suppose we are training or we are sitting with a medical board preparing the curriculum. Do you think there is something that, we can teach academically or in training?
I remember we used to have physical education in school, right? I got marked for physical education. I was a B minus or something in 10th standard, right? Um, um, I think actively mentioning every single person who comes into a college needs to engage in some physical act, which basically means that some time has to be, and yes, it will seem like a punishment, but uh, if we don't explain that this is absolutely essential, it doesn't matter if you don't graduate medical school, but we don't want you dying at 35 and 40 of a heart attack, right? It does not matter. So removing the focus from just factual knowledge to making sure that you experience taking care of yourself, which makes you a better individual to say, look, I understand you've got a problem. Here's how I do it. What are your options, right? When it comes to even patient care. So actionable point number one, I would say, is definitely provide from the first year of medical school. Here is how you take care of your physical health, right? I mean, take a class for all that take care, right? Number two, I think uh, it should be really important that a medical board or any institution that comes up should emphasize that here are your teleconsultation links, right? This will be manned 24 by 7 sort of thing, right? Uh, you reach out for help, like we've got suicide helplines, right? But you can't expect a physician to call a suicide helpline saying, like, hi, I'm a doctor, I want to kill myself. Not happening, right? So clear, confidential availability of just teleconsultation. It can be medical, surgical, whatever you want, right? Uh, People might be like, I can't go to this hospital. I treat patients over there. This is the only hospital in town, right? Kya karoge? So teleconsultation will help us with that, right? And I think at some level, I would say this, that understanding the philosophy of medicine rather than just the facts of medicine is important, right? And that is something that is extremely lacking in medical education. And when we talk about philosophy, we talk about certain ethical principles like autonomy or beneficence or non-maleficence. But one thing that we tend to not think about is justice, right? So when we think about the ethical principle of justice, and again, a little bit about that is all inequities that we see would probably come down. For example, the moment you think about justice, what I'm doing for person A and for person B with the same problem is the same, right? It doesn't matter if person A is a male and person B is a trans woman. It doesn't matter if person A is higher socioeconomic status and person B is socially poor. Now, again, I'm hoping for a utopian society. I do understand that. But unless we learn the philosophy of medicine, just having factual knowledge will only get us so far. It will make us excellent activity people, but then it wouldn't make us better human beings, which I think any profession should aim for. So, yeah, I think actionable points, I can't think of anything else.
No, I think you've covered so much in what you've shared with physical education and physical health, and and I'm so sorry. I'm just like, the time is making me a little nervous here. But yeah, thank you so much, Dr. Shiva. I think this has been extremely informative, and it has been an absolute pleasure talking to you and getting to learn so much. And I feel like there is definitely a part two required for this conversation. But thank you so much for everything you have shared.
My pleasure. My pleasure.
So we'll open the conversation to our members in the audience as well. If anybody has any questions.
May I oblige on this particular thing? Thank you, Dr. Shiva. It was an absolutely eye-opener for a lot of us with regards to always kind of considering the pedestal position and the sense of pressure that pedestal position can put up on someone. and them operating out of that setup as well. So it almost felt like the asbestos for the physician community was setting boundaries in some form or shape. That is coming almost self-inflicted as well to some degree, but with the context that we look at it, it is coming from being put on a pedestal constantly and expectation of being there. I'm going through so much problem. My doctor needs to be there for me, but not really thinking the doctor needs some time for them. And it was beautifully put by you how you have been finding this experience as listening to music, where a lot of us can have a burnout. But you have found your passion in this field, and it's like listening to the music where different people coming in and it's a song every single time. So it's not about you getting bored in any way or getting burnt out in that, but listening to a new song, a new genre, or even if it is the same song on repeat, it is a song you still enjoy. So thank you for sharing that beautiful insight there. I had my question was more to do with my professional problem that I'm facing, especially with medical students, because we have had sessions where we wanted to develop emotional awareness and building listening skills, because you mentioned how connection with your friends and how non-judgmentally them listening to you and not putting you on a pedestal is what made you feel like you got lucky in that, and so many haven't, but the constant it was like hitting a wall.
Mm-hmm.
And which you addressed as well. They're going to probably poo-poo me as well when I'm saying these things out, right? So because when I spoke with them and I'm asking them to be there for themselves and have a conversation with a patient, they're like, whoa buddy, I have a time limit of 10 minutes that I can spend with this patient. Oh, have we lost Dr. Shiva?
Yes, I got dropped out for a couple of seconds.
Yes. So sorry. I was asking that the wall that I got hit with was, listen, I am getting...
We need 5G, right? We need better internet.
Yes, most definitely. Sachin is also having really bad weather there. So, okay.
But if I can.
Yes, please go ahead, Sangeeta.
Yes, please.
Yeah, I mean, I think what Sachin was trying to say is something I experienced recently when my mother-in-law went through a very major surgery 2 weeks ago. So, and you could compare the different kinds of doctors who listened and responded to the pain, and doctors who spoke the theory and said the pain is there because just put up with it, So I was, thank you. This conversation just validated so much of what I went through just recently. Right. So the time thing, right? The time is the same for all, but it's the way you talk to the patient. Are you listening to the pain? There is the pain. Are you listening to it? Or are you just saying, yeah, I've shoved this catheter and it will pain. But are you listening to it? Maybe it's not shoved in correctly. Maybe there is a problem there. Maybe, it's, yeah. And there is a power thing, right? So it's like, we know more. So I don't have to share everything with you. But having said that, we were just totally and absolutely grateful from the bottom of our hearts for all the doctors who were there and helped us sail through this. I mean, and
thank you for sharing that. And I guess that's what probably Sachin was trying to say, as you very rightly said. If we can get people to actually hear the pain and what that pain means to that individual, rather than does it range from 0 to 10? I mean, that's a favorite question that's being asked nowadays. Like, how much is your pain? So it's not just 0 to 10, but what it means to that particular individual is an important thing. So thank you for sharing that.
I had another question. May I ask you?
Yeah, sure.
So I work as a mental health counselor, and I work with a lot of adolescents and young adults. And the 2 years of staying at home, I was wondering if you could share what it has meant for the children who were children who went into into the pandemic when they were in class 6, and they've emerged when they're in class 8. And there is a lot of turmoil. There's a lot of unwillingness to go back to school. And it's been very easy for some. They think it's easy because they've been in the comfort zone. So you don't have to worry about your how you look and the bullying and what people will say. And then suddenly now you have to go back to school in class 8. You've suddenly grown up during the pandemic. So yeah, I was just wondering if you can.
Again, thank you for sharing that. I know that Aisha and I wanted to talk about our youth mental health program, and we just never got around to that. But I'm sorry. But what you say is a valid thing. I mean, not just preteens who became teens during the pandemic, but we've even had kids who were school-going kids who registered, became college-going kids. I mean, these are all major life transitions, and there needs to be the societal feedback, like the constant feedback from our friends or whatever, to kind of navigate these things. And I think more than the loss of life, United States, it is about loneliness being as dangerous as smoking a pack of cigarettes, right? It causes not just health problems, it causes so many emotional issues, it prevents you from growing. And the pandemic pretty much put us in that spot. We survived it somehow. So let's hope we don't make the same mistakes again. And we figure out certain ways to keep not only our children safe, but also engaged with everybody else, right? And that's something that we have to move towards. We can't afford to lose our children this way sort of thing. Yeah, I can keep going on about how, at least in my end of the spectrum, I see people who come in dysfunctional, right? I see them when they are ill and they have major difficulties. But I'm sure at your level, you would be seeing them with, say, milder difficulties where they don't feel the need to say, go see a psychiatrist, right? And I'm sure there would be so many more kids who are experiencing the difficulties, but kind of just, I don't know, gritting their teeth and showing up at school anyhow. And each day is an ordeal for them. The teachers might be seeing it, or the teachers might be just catching up on syllabus. So I don't know. But what you point out is right, wherein people have lost more than just their health. They've lost social connectedness over this period of time.
And thank you so much, Dr. Shiva, for that. We have
Naveen has a thought.
Yeah.
Sorry. Yeah. Hi, Dr. Srinivasan. Yeah, thank you for your
Shiva is your
time.
Please.
Okay. Sorry. Actually, so we have had quite a lot of discussions, and I think, from a point of view of patients, maybe we learned something. I was wondering, how, being a friend or a brother or maybe a cousin to a doctor, how can we help, with this regard? I have two sisters who are doctor, and cousin who's a doctor with his wife. So it's since the pandemic, they have been kind of on a grind. So more or less like 12 hours a shift non-stop. So it's more or less really on the one hand, the selfish part of us would want them to maybe take a break and do not go to the hospital. But we know the situation. We know the people who are there in the ICUs, and so being from a small town, so it's kind of like, okay, so it's but we do watch them burn from the both ends, so to say. So it's kind of there is this helplessness, I would say. But like what can we do? If you have any suggestion, or if you ever thought of doing anything?
I can probably share with you what happened with me, in the sense like, okay, my spouse, my wife is also a physician, and she also works. She was working in the COVID ward during the pandemic. And so one thing that we tried to make sure was we had certain routines which were in a way immutable. For example, each day we would try to make sure that we had at least one meal or a dessert together, right? And I know that that's difficult because some days I would be hungry, but and she would come back late at night or whatever, but we would still end up having at least one meal or a dessert together, right? Uh, the second thing that I think, so it's really easy, right? You just make laddu, go sit over there, wait for them to come back, clean up, and then you just say, "Aao baitho, laddu khate hain, chai peete," right? And it just has to be done. I mean, the chai pe charcha is actually a very good way of just connecting with somebody, right? Maybe you don't want to talk about work. Maybe they may want to just talk about gossip, ghar ka gossip, right? ठीक है. I mean, if you have any gossip, you feed them the gossip. If they have any gossip, they feed you the gossip. But I would say leaving work at the doorstep is really helpful. So something that we would do is, what she and I would do is, we'd say, after 8 o'clock, no more calls, right? And even when she was in the COVID ward, I know for a fact that she would come back and she'd say, airplane mode. She'd just turn off the phone, and not even turn off the phone. She'd just put it on airplane mode. Now, if you have a friend, a brother, a cousin, a sibling, right? I think it would be really helpful if you kept yourself available on their schedule, right? You may not be able to do all the things. For example, there were times where I had long nights, but she would wake up and both of us would work out, right? So it's again important to realize that being available on their schedule really makes a huge difference. And even if they want to tell you about how the world is going to the dogs, you say, "Abhi kya kar rahe hai?" Right? And let's focus on the here and now. Right now, you're out here. We are not talking about the rest of the world. I don't know if you've seen the movie Don't Look Up. Have you? So it's the last scene where the entire family is sitting together, right? The world is going to the dogs. I mean, the world is ending. Doesn't make a difference. Abhi kya karna? Abhi khana khana, right? And that's all that matters. That makes a huge difference. So I don't know if that kind of helps you anyway.
Absolutely lovely. Thank you so much, Dr. Shiva. That it just makes me think of just having connections and just spending time with your loved ones, is just being there is that can help quite a bit. Sachin, did you want to add something?
No, I mean, I think I'm going to make this brave attempt of breaking my own stereotypical mold and go beyond calling Shiva a doctor and just call him Shiva. Shiva, it has been absolutely beautiful having this conversation with you and being part of this, and your insight on how to be available to the physician in our life. And I think that is something that we would love to resonate and spread the word around as well, so that people are more understanding to the plight of the physicians that a lot of us, especially in the Indian community, may have in close quarters, and being there for them. We are also on a mission to build up not just to build up mental and emotional awareness among not just mental health students, but even physicians and those who are studying to become a doctor, so that even though it is a big wall that we end up facing quite a bit, which is systematically placed over, we from our side, we promise to keep on fighting the good fight, and we look forward to working with rhymes as well, so that we can connect on a much grander scale and take this project much further. So really, thank you again, Shiva.
Thank you so much, Sachin. Thank you, Ms. Aisha. And yes.
Thank you everyone. Thank you, Dr. Shiva. Thank you, Naveed. Thank you, Sangeeta, for being here. We'll close now.